Well, my name is Sylvain Rochon. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Sylien Games. And what Sylien Games is all about is, giving the power to the players, letting the players generate their own games, creating their own experiences, and having fun, being creative overall. And all we do essentially is give the engine and the tools for them to do that. How do you do that? Well, a couple of years of development and doing really hard work. Because there is no product out there that does the same thing. Since there's a lot of product that allows players to make games. Flash. There's XNA by Microsoft, and Torque Engine, and different products like that. But you need to be a developer or a programmer to actually develop a game. So our model is that we want to make game making or game designing a property that can be done by any player out there, even though they don't have a clue how to program anything. And that was the problem. There's no model out there, so we had to experiment and do our own thing. And we also wanted it to be very accessible. So we chose to do a browser-based client. So on the client side, it's just on the browser, so people can play at work and being criticized by their bosses for playing too much and that sort of thing, and at home, and having generally a lot of fun. But on the engine side, we had to take into consideration all the variety of games that would be possibly created by players. So we're talking about turn-based, which is Trade Wars Rising is a turn-based game traditionally. So that's our first model. Real-time strategy, and we'll be adding soon models that will allow RPGs and MMO extensions as well. So persistent worlds, and all through the same engine. And how do you do that? To come back to your question is, you just have to experiment. We're using a code base that is pretty flexible. And after 5 versions of the engine, and experimenting, and having a lot of testers that are originally Trade Wars players, so they could tell us if things worked well for the, whatever was available, which was Trade Wars Rising. We were able to build something that not only works well with Trade Wars Rising, but also you can build all sorts of other variants, from the imagination of the players. And that's just trial and error, and hopefully will become maybe an example for other companies that may follow, but we'll be the first. So there you go. First off, I remember Trade Wars. And my original partner also remembered Trade Wars as a text-based game, because we were geeks at the time. Computer, 2,400 baud modems, trying to connect to bulletin board systems, and Trade Wars was everywhere. So we had played, and we just connected with the owner of the trademark, who still supported the old game around 2000, in 2005. And at the time, we were looking we're seeking a way to make our company unique. And so we're still sort of thinking about, well, what product are we going to produce? What's the engine going to be like? How will we give power to the players and all that stuff? And we essentially stumbled onto a post by Mr. Pritchett, who owns EIS and the property, who was looking for a small company to sort of help him do something special. And it's like almost by luck, really. And on a bulletin board system, essentially. And so we talked to him, and we made arrangements, and now we have the rights to make Trade Wars Rising, a graphical remake. And there's still a lot of people that still play the text-based version, so it was very easy. It's very easy for us to advertise it, since we know where the other players are. And a lot of players actually, because of nostalgia, actually look for Trade Wars by using Google and search engines, and they find us. So for us as a business, it's very powerful, because we don't market, and still people find us anyway, and they talk to their friends and through their networks. Close to 4 million players, we estimate, have played Trade Wars over 25 years, and they're out there. And so it's a huge advantage. So that's why when we had the opportunity about Trade Wars and speaking with the owner, we figured that's our market entry. That's the product, or at least the visual entity that we'll be able to present to the market to get our power to the player sort of product out there. And then once you get that out, then the engine sort of it gets known itself, and things sort of happen naturally. Actually, the difference between turn-based and RTS isn't very different. I mean, it's not that bad, because it's really just speed up, and there's different issues like balance-wise that we had to change according to data. But I mean, the turn-based game, which is like the variant, but graphical, was a little bit difficult to get, because I mean, the text-based game, it's a space game, so you have a universe that is a galaxy, and it's only text. So what players would experience is that the universe that was generated was actually very random, and they would never see the actual galaxy in a visual way. So each connection between solar systems was completely random. So how do you represent that graphically? Because we need to do a visual. So we had to actually figure out a way to keep the same gameplay elements and like the feel of Trade Wars, but transfer it into like a graphical map that in essence was two-dimensional, but with randomness and all that stuff. Plus, I mean, the engine had to be able to generate a map each time a game would be created by players and make sense. So a few generations later of the engine, we were able to actually get something that works well. There's another version coming out at the end of the month that is that is an improvement. But you have different issues like that. You're coming from a text-based version to a graphical version. I mean, you're also in game balance. I mean, there are some issues. I mean, you can't allow players to jump there's like a teleport system that ships can use. In the old game, you can go from one system to another like that. But in a graphical game, since you can see everything, it just doesn't make sense to allow that, because then players just have that technology have like way too much advantages, since you can see exactly where everything is. Whereas in a text-based game, you were sort of guessing all the time, because you couldn't see the map at all. So we had to consider and actually affect some changes on certain elements of the text-based game to adapt to a graphical version. But also, again, every time we made a change like that, we had to consider, well, how would other games work? Because the engine also has to generate other games that make sense as well. So we could never do something specific for Trade Wars Rising.
That's crazy.
Because we're working on an engine that generates games, not on Trade Wars Rising in a way, So yeah, it is a little bit crazy. We're all crazy in the company. We chose our people well.
All right.
But here we are, and we're very attractive to many people, because I mean, the system works and people are paying for it, even as a 1.0 version that has its flaws, like a normal 1.0. Okay. And people want to pay for the service and actually to have the privilege to play Trade Wars and eventually make their own thing.
So that's your business model. People are paying a fee per month, I guess, or something like this.
Yeah, it's more of a service, because you're accessing the engine. I mean, you're not paying for a game like a box set or anything. And obviously, you can also have a free model, so you can play for free, but you have limited access to the engine. You can only play like one game of Trade Wars Rising, like whatever game is on there. Like right now, it's only Trade Wars, but you can play one game, which sometimes can last like 15 to 60 days, like playing like your turns every day, that sort of thing. But you don't have access really to full creation or design aspects, and you can't play more than one game. So usually players are teased into paying because they want to play another game with their friends, or they want to create their own game, and they get interested in the other aspects of the engine. And it's a very cheap model. I mean, it's like $36 US for a year access, and with all the content that comes in, due to the players, players usually find it a great value.